Coming up,
I met my rapist on a dating app.
the sinister world of online love.
Is almost a second global pandemic.
Exposing a virtual hunting ground
One click, the stranger's already in the bedroom.
where no one is safe.
She goes, I went and met someone after school today. He wasn't a 15-year-old boy at all.
Hello and welcome to Extra Minutes. I'm Christina Ahern and I'm joined by 60 Minutes reporter Amelia Adams. Hello to you.
Good morning.
You have been investigating something that I think so many people are interested in because they're on. It's dating apps.
Yeah, it really touched a nerve, this one. I think, as you say, it's very, very relatable. I think it's about 30% of Australians who use dating apps. It's the modern world that we live in. And obviously, we have all probably heard a lot of success stories, people falling in love, marrying their Tinder or Bumble date. But there's a lot of hidden dangers as well. And I was really surprised by how dark and horrific some of the stories were.
How big is the problem? Because I think a lot of people would think, yeah, of course, there's a bad side to everything. But just how bad is it and how big is this darker side to dating apps?
Well, the best measure that we have comes from the Australian Institute of Criminology. I mean, we've had people writing into us for years and years with their stories and anecdotes. But in terms of data, the Institute of Criminology, over about 3 years, tracked the number of Australians who were reporting that they'd experienced some sort of sexual violence as a result of meeting someone on a dating app. Now, I should clarify, that term sexual violence in this context does include online violence, so sending nude, offensive photos, abusive threats, but a lot of it is in person. So 74% of people, that's 3 in 4 people are experiencing some sort of sexual violence, which is technology related.
That's a huge number. And Amelia, I know that you, of course, spoke to some victims who had some terrible stories. What kind of things did you uncover in this investigation?
I think one of the things that kept popping up is the anonymity. And that women, and we spoke to men as well in our research, but women who had connected with men online later found out that person was using a fake name, was telling things about themselves that were not true. They've then gone and met them. And sometimes, I think it's about 80% was the rough figure I was given from a doctor who's been studying this as well. 80% of cases, a sexually violent incident will happen on the first meeting. But a lot of times it was, a couple of weeks or a couple of months into dating this person they'd met online, that in one case, one of the women we spoke to, an horrific and violent rape took place. And it's only then that these women are thinking, gosh, I don't know this person. I didn't really know anything about them. I swiped and I messaged and went back and forth. And then they find themselves in this horrific situation.
You mentioned that one case study, Sarah, who was so brave, I thought, in speaking out and telling her story. What kind of, message did she have for people that find themselves on dating apps, given what she went through?
She's amazing, Sarah, very brave, as you say, and really had such an horrific experience.
It started escalating until I was screaming in his ear, stop. And then he put his hand around my throat and he used my neck as leverage.
So he was choking you while he was raping you?
Yeah.
I think her court process, because she did report her offender, and he was actually initially charged with rape as well as suffocation as well as choking. He was not found guilty. So the court process for her was as traumatic, really, as the assault itself.
He was found not guilty on all 6 counts. A trial scheduled for 1 month was collapsed in 7 days.
She's back on the apps though. She's really courageous, and she says, I was back on the apps within a week, cautiously and incredibly. Her offender, the man she says rapes her, popped up as someone that she should be a compatible match with. So her big issue, and she's an incredible advocate now for sexual violence victims in many ways, but one of her key issues, which I think is really important, is there's no screening process. This guy who had raped her was then suggested to her, so he has jumped back on the apps. He can match with her or any other woman or man, and repeat those behaviours. And that's something that I put to the head of a sex crimes unit in New South Wales. You know, isn't there a way to screen people? Shouldn't there be a red flag? And I have come across this before in investigating for 60 Minutes a domestic violence murder. And it's the same thing, you know, anyone, no matter what they've gotten up to and what crime, quite frankly, they've committed, can get back on the dating apps, and we're none the wiser.
It must be so traumatic for Sarah
Yeah.
and obviously it would be happening to other victims. And I know you spoke to doctors that are at the front line of this.
Really interesting.
What did they say?
Yeah, they're Victoria-based, Dr. Joe Tully and Dr. Janine Rouse. Dr. Joe Tully is a paediatric forensic clinician, so she's working with underage victims of sexual assault and violence. Dr. Janine Rouse is working with adult victims. And about 10 years ago, they both started seeing women mainly, but also some men, and in Joe's case, underage, you know, child victims presenting to their clinics and saying to them, I met my offender online. And, you know, I mean, we grew up like in the 80s and 90s, you're always told the majority of sexual violence happens at the hands of someone you know, a family member or an uncle, whatever it might be. That is no longer the case. So they had noticed that a growing number of people were walking to their hospitals and saying, I met this person on Tinder, I met this person on Snapchat. So they've decided to essentially track it and collate their data so they can take it to authorities. They've now also changed the way they do their rape kits. And they showed me this. There's, you know, it's a very, very comprehensive, as we know, forensic process, but there's also the questionnaire. And there's now a whole section on technology facilitated. Was this someone you met online? How did you connect? How many times did you talk? So this is also changing the way sexual violence is reported and treated. But I think one of the most staggering things for me in meeting these two doctors was that Joe Tully, who deals with underage victims, said 50% of the kids she's now seeing have met their abuser on Snapchat. 50%. And Snapchat is, you know, a fun social media, like connecting, messaging, send photos. They'll disappear straight away. I mean, there wouldn't be a kid or a teenager who doesn't use it.
Snapchat.
And this is becoming, you know, something that authorities are now aware of. And then it's like, how do we police it?
And I know that one of your other case studies that you have in the story had an experience, unfortunately, just like that with her daughter.
Yeah, so awful. And again, Alison was so brave, and her daughter gave her obviously full permission and support to tell her story. She was 17 and she actually was just looking for friendship because they'd moved to a new area in Victoria, and she was on Snapchat and she was chatting with what she thought was a 15-year-old boy. Ended up going to meet him to like say hi and hang out. They met at a train station. He immediately took her into a toilet cubicle and raped her horrifically. Now she, you know, she's a teenage girl. She's got no idea what's going on. She was absolutely terrified. She froze. And unfortunately, because she didn't fight him off, the consent laws at the time didn't allow him to be charged, even though police found him. He said, yep, that all happened. But, you know, she didn't say no, she didn't force me off. So that was a really difficult story to hear. And, you know, the mum, Alison, who spoke to us so bravely, her point is like, we put locks on our doors, we put locks on our windows, we do so much to protect ourselves, but if your child or teenager has a phone or a device in their room, like with one click of that button, a stranger can connect with them, and we just don't know who that person really is.
And I think the problem in that case as well is they had no luck with the judicial process, as you mentioned, because of the consent laws.
Because she didn't fight, because she didn't verbally say no, they said they can't press charges.
But also, is there anything stopping this guy doing the same thing to other young girls?
There's not. And Alison found out that he had used a fake name, and he was back on Snapchat with a fake name again. And that's her key concern. I mean, obviously her primary concern is her daughter's well-being and getting her through what is a life-changing trauma for a teenage girl. I mean, her life will never be the same. She's been raped. And, you know, she didn't get the justice that she so desperately wanted, so she's moving on with her life quite bravely. But Alison's message now is, I don't want other kids to be going through this.
Well, that brings us to the main question. What are the authorities doing about it? What are police doing about it?
It's so hard. The sense I was left with, especially from these fantastic doctors in Victoria who are determined to do something with their data and sort of be part of the solution, is that the online space and dating apps and websites are evolving faster than any of us can keep up with, and certainly faster than authorities can keep up with. Some of the stuff they're seeing and hearing in their clinics is just so extraordinarily distressing. And the question is, you know, how do you get ahead of it? How do you police it? I've put this to authorities before, and I did it again in this story. It is such a quagmire for them. You know, all of our state's police forces have incredible sex crimes units, which have detectives working around the clock, and they're, you know, pretending to be children. They're, you know, in many cases they are stopping those interactions happen. But the reality is it's impossible at the moment to screen, to know if the person that you're connecting with has got a prior conviction. We do have a new code of conduct because this issue has been becoming so prevalent. That came into force in April. It's voluntary. So it's a voluntary code of conduct. It's Australia-wide. I should point out it's a world first. So it's a great step. But basically, if you are an app company or a manufacturer, if you're Bumble or Tinder or whatever, you have to say, oh, we'll sign up to the we'll keep a really good eye on our users. We'll police it. So we will find ways to make reporting easier. If there's an incident, we'll promise to ban anyone who is, you know, breaking our rules. And so it's very much, it's pretty light on. It's pretty toothless when it comes to actual enforcement. And I think that's what so many of the women and mothers that we spoke to find so frustrating.
Because you obviously need the cooperation of the dating apps if you're going to stop this kind of conduct. What kind of sense did you get from the companies behind these dating apps? Were they wanting to stamp it out, or were they looking more into the profits?
Well, they're never willing to talk on camera, I can tell you that much.
So probably the first answer.
Probably. And they're always willing to give us a statement, which they mostly all did and have in the past, saying how committed they are to the safety of their users. Look, there's no doubt it's monetised. And, you know, as part of this story, just to have a look at changing trends, we actually went along to a speed dating session because we were hearing and seeing online that there's a bit of a kind of a retro swing back to in-person, because so many people are finding the online experience so kind of disappointing. You know, I mean, we're looking at the horrific far end of the spectrum of rape. But there's, you know, ghosting, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on that people are just getting so fed up with. So we went along to speed dating. The woman who runs this speed dating, and she does it in a couple of different states, says it's just like so popular. It's sold out. I mean, no one would have gone like 10 years ago, right? And it was really interesting talking to the people that were there.
What kind of things did they say? Because I can imagine a lot of them would have tried dating apps.
They've all been on the apps, and they're all like, I'm done, I haven't met anyone, or I've been ghosted, or I met a guy who turned out to be someone that he was married, or he was, you know, a horrible person, or they all had, you know, stories of disappointment, disenchantment, and they're all turning back to, I want to meet someone who I can actually have a chat with and assess them and feel like I get to know this person before I decide to go on another date. So that was really interesting.
In real life.
In real life.
I think the doctors who you mentioned and who you talked about, I think one of the really startling things to me was that they described this as a new pandemic.
Yeah.
Is that how bad this situation is with the dating apps?
Yeah, and I mean, that was Dr. Joanna Tully, and she is the paediatric forensic clinician, and certainly after going along to Monash Children's Hospital, which you'd be familiar with, in Melbourne, and seeing her rooms, hearing her stories, and looking at that data, I don't think that's an overstatement. When you think that 50% of kids who are being sexually abused are meeting their offenders online. And, you know, there's a whole lot of other stuff which we couldn't really even get into in the story because you could make, you know, episodes and episodes, but she's talking about kids now streaming themselves on YouTube and different apps, and you stream yourself and, you know, you get $10 or $20. And I mean, I've got 2 kids. I didn't know any of this was going on. So I think when she said it was a second global pandemic, I think that, you know, that really made me sit up, and I think for our viewers as well.
Is she confident in the work she's doing with the authorities that there can be an improvement in this situation, or does she, those doctors you spoke to, do they feel that this is just going to spiral even worse?
They're optimistic. I think they have to be. I actually said to them, you're describing to me a runaway train. You know, they're telling me all the things that are evolving and all the things they're seeing, and, you know, the policing of it's just not catching up. And I said, this is like a runaway train. Can we stop it? And it was Joe Tully that said to me, Dr. Tully said, we have to stop it. We have to stop it. Like, our children's well-being, mental and physical, like, this is their future. You know, they've all got, and we're talking about some late primary age kids, but mainly teens, obviously. Their lives and their connections and their friendships are in their phones and in their devices and in those apps. So we have to figure out a way that they can be used more safely. And that, I think, is the current conundrum for healthcare clinicians, for the apps themselves, for, you know, our government. I mean, the safety commissioner, it's, you know, it's their area. You know, do we need legislation that goes beyond a code of conduct? I think personally we probably do, and certainly for law enforcement as well. So that's the heavy question that I was left with.
I think most parents out there would say that there needs to be some kind of legislation, new legislation introduced. But Amelia, it was an absolutely fascinating investigation that so many people are interested in because so many people are on dating apps. And if you missed it, you can catch up on 60 Minutes YouTube channel or 9 Now.